Everything you picture when you imagine the first religion is wrong. You're seeing a temple, a priest, an altar, an offering, a chant. Farmers who invented gods to explain the harvest and the thunder. Wrong order, wrong place. Wrong by more than 160,000 years. The oldest thing we have ever found that humans built for no reason we can explain is not a temple. It is a ring of broken stone, in absolute darkness, 336 meters underground. And the hands that stacked it were not ours. Get the scale straight. Writing is about 5,000 years old. The Great Pyramid, 4,500. Göbekli Tepe, the oldest structure anyone will call a temple, is 11,500. The behavior underneath all of it, humans burning irreplaceable calories on things that could not feed, shelter, or defend them, runs at least 100,000 years earlier. So the question is not when religion got organized. It is when a human first looked at the world and decided there was something else in it. Which raises a problem. You cannot excavate a belief. There is no fossil of a prayer. What you can excavate is waste. Hours, a hungry population could not spare, poured into objects that would never be eaten, worn, or thrown at an animal. Enormous cost, zero survival return. That is the fingerprint of an idea. Archaeologists are careful with it, because they have been burned. For 50 years, the most famous story in this field was the Shanidar flower burial, a Neanderthal in Iraq, laid on a bed of wildflowers. In 2023, Chris Hunt's team re-examined the pollen and found the likelier florist was a burrowing bee. The flowers dissolved. The bar went up. Here is what still clears it. Begin with the dead. Tinshemet Cave, Central Israel. In March 2025, Yossi Zeidner's team published what they had lifted from the floor. Bodies 100,000 years old, curled into the fetal position, in pits cut into rock. Beside them, objects, red ochre, animal bones, basalt pebbles. You cannot eat a pebble. And some of it was carried in from hundreds of kilometers away, on foot to be laid beside a body that could no longer see it. 100 kilometers north, at Skul and Kafse, the same script. A man buried with a wild boar's jawbone on his chest. A boy of about 13, hands at his neck, clutching deer antlers to his heart. You do not cut the antlers off a stag for a corpse, unless you have decided the corpse still needs something. Now a second kind of evidence. Not a body, a creature that never existed. August 1939, a week before Germany invaded Poland. A geologist named Otto Volsing pulls shattered mammoth ivory from a cave in southern Germany. War breaks out. The fragments sit forgotten in a museum for 30 years. In 1969, an archaeologist named Joachim Hahn fits 200 pieces back together. What surfaces is 31 centimeters tall, roughly 40,000 years old, with the body of a man and the head of a cave lion. A minority of researchers argue it is really a bear on its hind legs. Most of the field disagrees. Not an animal, not a person, the oldest known image of a thing nobody has ever seen. And it cost. Wolfhine carved a replica using only Ice Age flint. Removing the base of the tusk took 10 hours. The whole figure took more than 400. 400 hours on an object you cannot eat, wear, or throw at a mammoth, while somebody else fed you for 2.5 months. That group had decided this was worth feeding someone for. Then belief acquires an address. December 1994, southern France. 3 cavers squeeze through a gap in a cliff and find Chauvet. Lions, rhinos, horses, drawn about 36,000 years ago, with shading that should not exist for another 20,000. And nobody lived in there. No hearths, no domestic rubbish, no sign of habitation. People walked into the dark carrying fire, made the images, some of them 250 meters from daylight, and left. In one chamber, a block of stone had fallen from the ceiling. Someone lifted the skull of a cave bear and set it on top. Underneath it, charcoal. A fire had been lit there. At least 190 cave bears died in that cave. One of them got a plinth. Now, careful. The paleobiologist Hervé Bocquerens says it flatly. There is no way to tell whether that was ritual or simple curiosity. A question mark on a rock. Then it starts to cost real money. Sungir, outside Vladimir in Russia, found in the 1950s by workers cutting a clay quarry. More than 30,000 years old, an older man and 2 children, a boy of about 13, a girl of about 9, laid head to head in one grave. All 3 went into the ground covered in beads carved from mammoth ivory. more than 13,000 of them. The paleoanthropologist Randall White made those beads himself, the old way: cut, ground, scored, drilled. Each takes roughly an hour. 10,000 hours of skilled work. One person doing nothing else, 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, would need more than 3 years. 3 years of a hunter-gatherer economy's labor, put in a hole, in the dark, where nobody would see it again. Some read that as status, displayed to the living, others as luggage for a journey. Both readings need the same thing underneath. A community close to starvation had decided the dead were worth 3 years. And then belief starts to build. Here is the story you were taught. Farming makes surplus. Surplus makes cities. Cities make priests, and priests build temples. First the field, then the town, then the temple. In 1994, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt walked up a hill outside Sanliurfa, in southeastern Turkey, and found that sequence running backwards. Göbekli Tepe. Radiocarbon dates the oldest excavated structures to roughly 11,500 years ago. Rings of limestone pillars cut in the shape of a T, 5.5 meters tall, 7 to 10 tons each, carved with foxes, snakes, and vultures. No pottery, no metal, no writing, no wheel, and not one domesticated plant or animal in the entire site. Every bone they have dug out is wild. People who had not yet invented farming quarried 10-ton stones with flint, hauled them uphill, and stood them in a ring. Schmidt's line was, "First came the temple, then the city." Now the honest part. Since Schmidt died in 2014, Lee Clare's team has found hearths, middens, tools, water systems. People probably lived there. The world's first temple is disputed now, and nobody knows what those enclosures were for. But the thing that breaks the textbook survives all of it. Whoever raised those pillars was still hunting wild animals. Monument first, farm second. Which brings us back to the ring in the dark. Bruniquel Cave, southwestern France. Sealed by rockfall in the Ice Age, reopened by cavers in 1990. 336 meters from the entrance, a distance you cannot walk without carrying fire. The floor holds 2 rings, built from stalagmites. About 400 of them, snapped off, sorted to length, stacked in layers. 112 meters of broken stone, 2.2 tons, and on every structure, burn marks. Fires were lit inside them. In 2016, Jacques Joubert's team dated the calcite by uranium series, 176,500 years old. Modern humans would not reach Europe for another 130,000 years. The builders were Neanderthals. Not our ancestors, our cousins, a separate branch of the family, gone for 40,000 years. And the function of those rings, in the words of the paper itself, remains conjectural. We do not know what they were doing down there. Nobody does. Nobody may ever. For a long time, we told ourselves a comfortable story about this. That religion was bad science, frightened people inventing thunder gods because they did not understand weather. A flattering story. It makes us the adults in the room. Then look at what is actually in the ground. It does not cluster around thunder. It clusters around the dead. Antlers pressed into a boy's hands. 10,000 hours of ivory buried where no eye would find it. A skull on a stone. A fire lit inside a circle, 300 meters underground, by people who were not even us. They were not explaining the world. They were arguing with it. Here is what archaeology can and cannot do. It can tell you, with radiocarbon and uranium, the moment human beings began behaving as though something else was there. It cannot tell you whether they were right. That question is not in the dirt. It never was. 176,000 years, and we still have not closed it. What do you think they were doing down there, in the dark? The studies are all linked in the description below. Subscribe if you'd like the next one.